Hello, Sonya Reines-Djivanides. Thank you very much for joining us on this series of interviews that Quaker Council for European Affairs is organizing on the impact of COVID-19 on peace and security. Sonya, you're the Executive Director of the European Peacebuilding Liaison Office, which Quaker Council for European Affairs is an active member of. But I wonder if for the audience you might introduce briefly the organization.
Sure. So we're an organization of 41 members that are based in Europe but working all around the world. And what we're trying to do is make the EU a more effective global peace actor.
Thank you very much. As a head of a peace-building organization, I wonder if you could share some of your thoughts, some of your analysis of the impact of COVID-19 on peace-building.
So there's some immediate reactions right now coming out from a lot of peace-building organizations about how they're having to adapt to the situation. I think primarily everybody was in a safety and security situation of moving staff and adapting programming. We're now seeing there are more reflections about how to do conflict sensitivity in this time. We're also seeing organizations come up with really practical recommendations in local contexts about what can be done. There was a lot that was learned from the Ebola pandemic. And I think peace-building organizations have a tremendous amount to contribute in terms of communication, social cohesion, and there's also a presence on the ground because many of the organizations that are members of EPLO have local staff. And so as embassies in the European Union and others are retracting their staff and recalling their staff back to their home countries, these people are on the ground and able to provide analysis of how those countries are being impacted and what can be done. And I think the response is going to be quite long. So there's an immediate health and sanitary and security perspective now, and then we know that there's going to need to be a more conflict sensitive approach over the long term to try to help build better relationships between the communities and those that provide assistance, those that might be left out, and the vulnerable groups in these conflict-affected countries.
Thank you very much. You've mentioned that some of your member organizations have specific recommendations to adjust and adapt to the situation. That clearly means that there is a peace-building lens to this. I just want to give you the opportunity to share maybe some of the initiatives that you thought were really maybe different and adjusting to this environment, but also maybe some of the recommendations.
So I think a lot of it's been around communication. So there's so many, I really couldn't begin to enumerate them, but EPLO has a blog, and on the blog we are capturing what our members are writing and what's coming out. So people are trying to be as succinct as possible, but it also depends on who the actor is. So whether or not you're providing assistance to your own staff, to people within a different sector, or whether it's more global or strategic recommendation about conflict sensitivity of bilateral assistance. So I would sort of defer people back to the EPLO blog to take a look at some of those specific initiatives. And I think we'll see much more coming out as we learn from what's being done. So at this time, there's also an introspective look from peace-building organizations about how to be up and running. They're not able to carry out the activities that they have been doing. What new things can be done, smaller and medium, and how can we learn from them?
Thank you very much. How do you see this impacting the work of the EU on conflict prevention and peace building?
So they've already pivoted. The foreign policy instrument is already has a pandemic response, the COVID pandemic response, with part of the funding that they're doing. I think they've also, I'm not inside, so I really can't speak for them, but already starting to look at in the conflict affected zones that they're already supporting projects and individuals and communities. How is this impacting them? How can they be flexible and change the nature of the work? I think overall, we'll see tomorrow the new multi-annual financial framework that's presented. And there's going to be some difficulties. I think there's going to be less money. And I think there's going to be a push to put money into what is absolutely normal, which is a response to the sanitary and health crisis that's going on. And what we can't forget is how is that being done? So you hear people talk about the need for conflict sensitivity, the need for peace building now. You hear the need for a rapid response at the same time and the need to take risks. And how does that all work in practice is something very, very different. And so what we need is there not to be less assistance to these organizations and to their programming in order for them to be able to do what they can now and very much the aftermath.
Thank you very much for already touching on some of the thinking process from the peace building community on what not to do in terms of adjusting the funding. I'm wondering if there may be an opportunity here in a better understanding of the links between health, peace and security and development, and maybe an opportunity actually to adjust funding to responses that understand security as a shared security concept. Do you see this as a possibility or actually not?
Well, one can hope. One can hope that this is a point of reflection for people to think about the investment that has or hasn't been made in human security. If you take the money in comparison to what's been done in terms of preparation for war and preparation for the aftermath of war and what's been done to support basic needs and human security of populations in these countries and to understand the root causes of conflict, to better understand why is it that people feel the need to move around, why are people joining extremist groups, what is it that gives people resilience, hope, the idea that the tomorrow is going to be different from today. So I think there is an opportunity to look at that. There's certainly the need to adapt any kind of assistance that's being done now to not make conflict dynamics worse.
A last question to continue on this area of potential silver linings. We've seen the UN Secretary General call for a global ceasefire with some glimpses of hope in some areas of the world. Do you see or have you observed any other silver linings in international politics around peace and security?
Well, everybody's being watched very closely. This is the big stress test, and how people, whether it's how members within the union support each other, everybody's looking at that. How are we supporting Italy? How are we supporting Spain? How are we supporting, France and Germany? How are countries supporting each other? What are they letting go by within the European Union in terms of human rights and other basic rights? People are also looking at that. And we should be able to better reflect on learning how, in some ways, unprepared we were for this, but also the possibility to do things differently and the possibility to think outside of the box, the possibility that our contribution to how this is handled will increase social cohesion rather than increase othering and setting people apart. So the system is clearly stressed. Some say it's fractured. We can't go back to the way that things were before. But it is a period of reflection and one in which I hope we can come up with some new ways of doing things.
Thank you very much, Sonya. I really appreciate your time and look forward to continue this conversation with you.